Joining us, we have His Grace Krishnachandra Prabhu, who will be introducing us to this topic. First of all, I would like to express heartfelt gratitude to thousands and thousands of devotees all over the world who have solidly supported this project thus far. The first description of such a replica of Vrindavan is actually there in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, where Krishna in Dwarka is feeling intense separation from Vrindavan, and the queens of Dwarka observe his feelings of separation, and then Krishna suggests to Brahmaji to create a replica of Vrindavan right in the outskirts of Dwarka. So that is where Brahmaji instructs Vishwakarma to create an exact replica of Vrindavan. And if you see the Brihad Bhagavatamrit, 2 volumes published by BBT with commentaries by Gopi Paranandan Prabhu, there are 2 chapters where the description of the replica of Vrindavan and Krishna trying to relieve his feelings of separation by roaming in that forest of Vrindavan that is described. And very interestingly, you will also find descriptions of dioramas in Sanskrit. So the word diorama is also described in Sanskrit there. And there, Krishna is actually talking to the dioramas. And when he sees the diorama of Mother Yashoda, Krishna exclaims that you look too stunned, and therefore it seems you're not blinking your eyes because of being in a state of astonishment. And so we find that Krishna in Vrindavan was in the great association of the gopis, and in Dwarka he was missing the association of the Brajavasis, and so he recreated this Vrindavan. And then what is the connection of that replica of Vrindavan with the current history of Iskcon and the Govardhan Eco-Village? These are some very interesting things which we will hear from His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj this evening. We are also extremely grateful to the devotee community at Iskcon Chopati for stepping forward and assisting in so many wonderful ways in creating the different manifestations at the Govardhan Eco-Village, beginning with the agriculture and then the retreat center and the Goshala. And last year, with the creation of the Madan Mohan temple, the entire 10 years of intense activity, which was initiated by His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj, has come to its fulfillment. This event, this evening, has been conceived by His Grace Sri Guru Charan Prabhu and Haripriya Radha Mataji. Both of them are leading the project at Govardhan Eco-Village by creating various experiences, and especially Vrindavan is a very important theme because Srila Rupa Goswami Pad has mentioned 5 things which are extremely important for nourishment of our devotional service. First is holy name, second is the Srimad Bhagavatam, third is the worship of the deities, fourth is serving the Vaishnavas, and fifth is serving the holy Dham. So as people say that Vrindavan is 2 to 3 hours away from Delhi, so we also say that Vrindavan is now 2 to 3 hours away from Mumbai because we have with us the Govardhan Eco-Village. As Maharaj is joining us, I'll just like to recollect one incident, about Maharaj, that in 2005, we had one Bengali art maker who was making dioramas for us. His name was Milan Bagh. And right in 2005, His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj, he told me at that time that we should have Milan go to Govardhan farm. That time this was known as the Govardhan farm, and create dioramas of Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan, including his demon killing pastimes. Milan had already started making some dioramas at Chopati, and so Maharaj said you should have him make for the Govardhan farm also. So at that time I asked Maharaj, for what purpose? Because right now there is nothing there. So Maharaj said, when these dioramas are made, they will be part of our Vrindavan Forest at the Govardhan farm. So I said, currently the whole place is a forest. So which Vrindavan Forest are you talking about? So he said, in future, when we develop this farm, then at that time we will also develop the Vrindavan Forest. At that time, this Milan, who is currently quite old, and the kind of talent which he has, we may not get that again. So let us have him create those dioramas so that we have the best artists make them. And at that time, we did not have sufficient funds. We did not have any facilities, but because Maharaj had that vision, so Maharaj insisted and we had that. And after creating of those dioramas, they remained in the godown for more than 12 years before, a couple of years back, they found their place. So therefore, as a leader, we could see that His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj has a vision, and vision basically means even if the present circumstances are not favorable, but if something is pleasing to the Acharyas, we must keep dreaming and wishing for the same. I hand over now to Krishnachandra Prabhu to begin the proceedings of today evening's discussions on the Vrindavan Forest. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gauranga Prabhu. Would like to welcome all the devotees who have joined this program. It's really a deep pleasure and honor to have you with us. And it's interesting how, in spite of these torrid COVID times, we've also been given these regular opportunities for online satsang. And therefore, we are extremely grateful to His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj and also to His Grace Gauranga Prabhu that today they have agreed to recreate Vrindavan mood, the Vrindavan atmosphere, and understand from Maharaj's eyes what his vision was and how it will develop in the future for our Vrindavan Forest of Grace at Govardhan Eco Village. Many devotees may not be aware that actually the search for such a farm, and it really started more than 20 odd years ago. So though we could not see his vision, I mean, I speak for myself, that we had no understanding of Maharaj's vision behind such a project. But eventually, with some efforts, we could get a farm at a village called Dound, and about 2.5, 3 hours beyond Pune. So since it was our first experience, eventually, after some time, we found that it was not really suitable for reasons of soil, agriculture, and also logistical reasons, distance being almost 7 hours from Mumbai. So we sold it and reinvested the proceeds in present Vada farm in GEV in a much smaller scale at that time, maybe 15, 17 years ago. Perhaps in our lifetime, or at least for a long time, we may not be able to really fully comprehend the importance of such a project and its huge impact on tens of thousands of people in the future. But at least to get some idea and the excitement and the distinct privilege that we have of being associated with such a project, I would request Gauranga Prabhu to facilitate the conversation with His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj, so that we can have a deeper insight into the history and the significance of the project.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Krishnachandra Prabhu. And I would like to welcome His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj for this conversation on this topic on the creation of the Vrindavan Forest at the Govardhan Eco Village. Thank you, Maharaj, for giving your valuable time for us to share your experiences. I'll begin by asking you about Srila Prabhupada's vision for farm communities, because Srila Prabhupada established Iskcon in New York, and then Srila Prabhupada has established now currently by his inspiration more than 600 projects of Iskcon are there all over the world. But not much is known about Srila Prabhupada's emphasis or priority about farm communities. So let us begin by hearing from you some of your insights into Srila Prabhupada's vision on farm communities. You have to unmute yourself, Manoj. Unmute. Yeah.
I am so grateful to be with all of you. Thank you, Krishnachandra Prabhu. Thank you, Gauranga Prabhu, for making this wonderful event possible. Thank you to Haripriya Radha Devi and Sri Guru Charan Prabhu for having this idea to bring us all together to discuss a subject that is so very dear to the heart of Sri Radha Gopinath and Srila Prabhupada. I'd like to begin just by chanting the Mangala Charana together. Everyone, please. Om Agyan Timidandasya Gyananjana Chalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Bandeham Sri Guru Sri Jutapatakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hari 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 Rama 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 Hari Hari Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatyate Shatharine. I'm coming back in one moment. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Gauranga, for this very, very vital question. It's a question that could take days to discuss. But in essence, Srila Prabhupada had such a vision. In the 1940s, in his writings for his Back to Godhead magazine, Srila Prabhupada would be discussing about the shortage of oil and how that would cause so much disturbance in this world. He spoke about climate change and the dramatic situation that will come if we plunder, exploit, and pollute the resources of Mother Earth. And Srila Prabhupada approached it from a very spiritual perspective. So, Sarva Loka Maheshwaram, that everything is Krishna's property. Om Purnam Ada Purnamidam, that everything is coming from Krishna, and therefore everything in its potential state is spiritual. And when we see the earth and the resources of the earth as Krishna's property, then we cannot exploit. We cannot unnecessarily pollute. But with a grateful heart rather than a greedy heart, rather than a negligent heart, when we're really grateful, we're not neglectful. Today, due to greed, due to arrogance, and for most people, just due to a habituated state of neglect, we are causing so much pollution. But if we have a grateful heart to understand the person of Krishna, the person of God who's giving us all these resources, then how we interact with nature is very much how we are expressing our gratitude and engaging in the service of the Lord. There is no difference. And people have become so dependent on various technologies that we lose touch with the basic natural gifts of God that is the foundational basis of everything we have, who we are, and how we live. So the idea of simple living, high thinking is not about being wealthy or being poverty-stricken. Simple living, high thinking is about having a simple view of life, that everything is God's grace. Everything that exists is God's energy. And therefore, let me see Krishna everywhere in this way. There was a famous example where someone asked Srila Prabhupada, how do I see you everywhere? Or how do I see Krishna everywhere? And Prabhupada, he pointed to his eyeglasses, his spectacles, and said, when you see these spectacles, what do you think? And the person said, I think that these are my Guru Maharaj's spectacles. And what do you feel when you think like that? He said, when I think of you, I feel love for you. And he said, similarly, everything belongs to Krishna. If we see it that way, whatever we see Krishna in that, in his energy. So the idea of simple living, high thinking is to be in a mood of service to Krishna, to God, in every situation of life. And to appreciate the very basic natural gifts that we have in our life. When Krishna lived in this world, he was a cowherd boy. For some time he lived in Mathura. For some time he lived in Dwarka. But we especially focus on Krishna when he lived in Vrindavan, where Prabhupada said Balaram would hold the plow, which represents agriculture, and Krishna would carry his flute and a little stick, which represents cow protection. His name, Govinda, one who gives pleasure to the earth, to the cows, to the senses. So Krishna lived this natural life, and Srila Prabhupada could see what was going to happen in the world. He was the most complete, fully realized, transcendental environmentalist. He could see it when nobody was even talking about it, hardly, when it wasn't even an issue. He could see what was coming because he had this spiritual insight. So when he first came to America, the very basic principles, which were the objectives of Iskcon, one of them was to create a holy place that will reveal Krishna's pastimes. So even when Srila Prabhupada had absolutely nothing, he had actually, before he even had any initiations or disciples, before he even had property, when he just got that little storefront, he was envisioning this. It was one of his primary objectives. And when a piece of land came by Krishna's grace, he named it New Vrindavan. And other lands he named New Talavan. He named these farm communities in such a way that we understood that they represent Vrindavan. They represent Krishna's place. So Srila Prabhupada would say sometimes that there will be a time when people will want to take shelter of these communities. And when Srila Prabhupada came to New Vrindavan in 1969, he actually stayed a full month. And at that time, there was practically no running water, practically no electricity. There was no road. You had to walk up a mud path for several miles to this top of a remote mountain with an old farmhouse that was over 100 years old. It was dilapidated. It was rat infested. And yet Srila Prabhupada stayed there. And he was so happy. And by his own appreciation, by his example, and by his words, he was teaching us how important it was to him. And ultimately, what was important to Srila Prabhupada, what was most important to humanity. He really did not want anything himself. He could have stayed at Radha Damodar Temple in Vrindavan if it was about himself. Whatever was dear to Srila Prabhupada is what was most relevant to the well-being of humanity and ultimately all living beings. So Srila Prabhupada, he would just, when the first cow was gotten, it was a cow that practically cost nothing because devotees had no money. She was a tiny crossbreed cow. She had one blind eye, and she seemed very worthless. But Srila Prabhupada, he named her Kalia because she was black mostly and with some white spots. She's very small. And Srila Prabhupada gave her such honor, such respect as Krishna's cow. And whatever little milk she gave, when Srila Prabhupada said, if you give the cow love and protection and make the cow happy, then the milk is actually motherly love in liquid form. If you exploit the cow and cause terror and fear in the cow, then the milk is actually an expression of their fear and their insecurity. So Srila Prabhupada gave us this very, very sweet lesson. And, you know, he would praise the milk, he would praise Kalia and any little vegetable that would grow on our land, even if it was a weed that was edible. Srila Prabhupada would praise it with so much enthusiasm because he wanted to instill within our hearts how important it is. This idea of learning how to engage in the service of agriculture, of growing food and flowers, fruits and vegetables and grains and nuts, to grow them with love and devotion, to grow them from a soil that is sanctified by the acknowledgement that it is very dear to Krishna. And in this spirit, the idea of Vaishnav Seva was very much at the heart of Srila Prabhupada's vision, that we learn to live together with Krishna in the center. And in this world, we're so much egoistically centered, so much about ourselves, that our concern for others is oftentimes very conditional. But Srila Prabhupada taught that a real family, a Vaishnava family, a devotee family, when actually we recognize that everyone is a child of Krishna and that everything is the property of Krishna, then we really care about each other. We really care about the cows. We really care about the birds and the other animals. We really care about the plants and all the gifts of Mother Earth. And ultimately, we really want to care about all living beings, all humanity everywhere. And Srila Prabhupada wanted these communities, these farm communities, to be examples in which people could come to learn a natural life based on spiritual principles. And he wanted to teach people how to love God. And that's where the Vrindavan Forest was so much an important, integral part of Srila Prabhupada's idea of his farm community. We teach people the environmental sciences, the natural life, a peaceful life, and at the same time, in a way that we can really learn to love Krishna by being absorbed, deeply absorbed in remembering Krishna, in chanting Krishna's names and hearing about Krishna and serving Krishna, and ultimately recognizing Krishna in each other's hearts.
Thank you, Maharaj, for sharing this amazing insight into Srila Prabhupada's vision for the farm communities in general. Specifically now, focusing on New Vrindavan, where you spent significant amount of time. What were some of Srila Prabhupada's visions for New Vrindavan? And during Srila Prabhupada's visits to New Vrindavan during those days, when you saw him, interacted with him, and heard from him, which are some of those prominent memories which have created a deep impact in your heart?
I think I already spoke on this subject, but I'll give a couple memories. Yes, I remember there was a simple weed that grew. It was called pokeweed, and it just grew everywhere, wild. And even though when Prabhupada would come, devotees would come from New York and other places and bring so many vegetables and so many other very good foods, when Srila Prabhupada heard that that pokeweed grew at New Vrindavan, it grew in our own soils. That's the one he put the most emphasis on how much he liked. And devotees were making Prabhupada pokeweed dal and pokeweed pakoras and pokeweed subjis and everything. And Prabhupada was just happy because he wanted to encourage us that it's not the thing that we eat that actually impacts us. It's how it pleases Krishna. You know, there's eating bhoga, and we can something that's not offered to Krishna, but when it's offered to Krishna, it becomes prasadam, and the same item becomes completely spiritually transformed. So, you know, it's that prasadam aspect that gives the greatest value to food. And in the same way, Srila Prabhupada was teaching that when Krishna gives us this land, and to grow food and land means very hard work and a lot of sacrifices. It's not that food just grows, but in order to really value the great sacrifice, because it's these days it's much easier to just buy something that somebody else has grown, and often they grow it with all kinds of, you know, chemicals and pesticides and everything like that. But it tastes good, and we can even offer it to Krishna. But Srila Prabhupada wanted these farm communities to make another statement, which begins by the appreciation in the devotees' hearts themselves, that when Krishna gives us land, you know, however difficult it is, however much sacrifice and work, we grow our food. We take care of the cows and the goats and the animals, and in this way, it gives something very, very special to that offering. And Srila Prabhupada was feeling so much value and love in those simple weeds to teach us. They don't really taste good. They don't really taste bad. They're just kind of weeds. But the value of the bhava, the emotion that is within what it represents. And this is very much how devotees should be thinking. We feel according to the value of what it represents to Krishna. And what it represents to Krishna is ultimately what's to the greatest well-being to humanity and to all beings. So that was one thing. I remember in 1972, I had just come to New Vrindavan not long before, and I was living up on that mountain with just a few people. And I would climb down mountains and cross little creeks of water and then climb another mountain to go to work on preparing the house that Srila Prabhupada was going to live in. So it was just myself and one other devotee, Sudhanu Prabhu, and we were scraping the old stuff and painting it. It was a really old, dilapidated house. We were trying to make it nice for Prabhupada. And the night before Srila Prabhupada came, they discovered the toilet didn't work. There was only one toilet in the house. So it was an emergency, and somehow everyone wanted to go to sleep, and I was I just came. I still had long hair. I didn't really know much about anything. So I was ordered, you fix the toilet. And if it doesn't work, it's a great offense to Srila Prabhupada. So I worked all night long because I had no idea what I was doing, but I was crying to Krishna, help me, help me. And ultimately, right when the sun was rising, the toilet flushed. And I was so proud and I was so happy. And a couple days later, I asked Srila Prabhupada's assistant, Nanda Kumar Prabhu, is the toilet working well? Because I was kind of attached to the fruits of my actions. And he said, Prabhupada hasn't used it yet. He goes out into the field and responds to nature's calls in the field, because Prabhupada said now that he's here at New Vrindavan, he wants to just be with nature, with the cool breezes. And I understood Srila Prabhupada just really loved nature. And he gave an instruction to make houses out of the materials at our community. And they were called Prabhupada Houses. And one of the first people who moved in was Devata Prabhu, who comes to Govardhanika village sometimes to serve the oxens in the bowls. But those Prabhupada houses were very, very dear to Prabhupada because they were made in a very simple way out of the ingredients that were naturally there for us. So Srila Prabhupada was giving us these messages. He emphasized very strongly there should be no laziness. People shouldn't just come here to be peaceful. They should come here to serve, to work hard, to surrender, because that's where they'll find the deepest, greatest peace. And that was Srila Prabhupada's example. That was his vision.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maharaj, for sharing those insights. And I mean, you met Prabhupada in Vrindavan, and then you came to New Vrindavan. And in your journey home, you write how you had kind of made a firm determination that if given an opportunity, you would stay in Vrindavan. So coming to New Vrindavan, you must have felt great separation from Vrindavan. So how did you deal with that separation? Because, you know, it was quite uncertain when you would go next to Vrindavan. So could you share your experience?
I met Srila Prabhupada first in Mumbai, Bombay, at the Cross Maidan Festival. It was the first major program Srila Prabhupada had in India in March of 1971. And I spent about 10 days every day with Srila Prabhupada and the devotees. And he deeply affected me. I had the highest esteem for his saintly nature and his incredibly deep instructions. But at that time, I was still very much on a journey, and I considered him a great, great saint that I learned from. And then I moved on to so many other spiritual teachers and various paths. But it wasn't until I came to Vrindavan. In Vrindavan, you know the story, how I arrived on Janmashtami of 1971. And I couldn't leave because I got typhoid. And by the time I recovered, I just loved Vrindavan. And the mood of the place, the power of the bhakti of that place, Krishna's presence in that place completely transformed my life. I had lived in many different holy places, both in India and other parts of the world. I studied various religions. I studied various schools of yoga. But the atmosphere of Vrindavan completely conquered my heart. And it was there that I surrendered my heart to Radharani and Krishna. And in those days, Vrindavan was a very, very simple place with hardly any traffic, and it was mostly forests and pastures, even around the village of Vrindavan itself. Later on, where Srila Prabhupada got the Krishna Balaram temple property. That whole area was just pastures. There was only a few little scattered ashrams and tens and thousands of trees and cows grazing. So in Bombay, Srila Prabhupada planted the seed of bhakti in my heart, but it remained germinating underground. And in Vrindavan, that's where actually the influence caused that seed to come out from the ground and begin to blossom. And a few months later, Srila Prabhupada came to Vrindavan for about a 10-day visit. And it was then that my experience of Srila Prabhupada was on such a deeper level. I could appreciate so much that what Prabhupada was teaching and what he was giving was so authentic and pure. It was the very essence and the depths of all spiritual thought. And he was giving it with such compassion. And there I actually accepted Srila Prabhupada as my guru and surrendered my heart to him. But there was no temple in Vrindavan at that time for Iskcon, and there were no Iskcon devotees living. So when Srila Prabhupada left, I was still there. And Srila Prabhupada told me that he was very pleased that I loved Vrindavan so much. I wrote about this in the journey home, that some devotees were preaching to me so strong that I should come and join Srila Prabhupada's party and travel with him. And I told them that I just want to stay in Vrindavan, and if Prabhupada starts something here, then I'll be here to serve him. And they were calling me all some very bad names, in the sense of chastising that, why are you attached to Vrindavan? You should be come to serve your guru. And then one day I met with Srila Prabhupada and I bowed down to him. And he said, "How long have you been living in Vrindavan?" And I said, "About 6 months." And I was very much fearful that he would chastise me just like some of the others of his followers. And Srila Prabhupada smiled and said, "Wonderful. Vrindavan is such a wonderful place." And then he patted me on the head, and his glistening, loving glance made me feel totally at home. And of course, I had to leave Vrindavan because my visa expired. And I wouldn't, in those days, after your visa expires, you had to wait at least 6 months to get another visa to return. So I came to the West. But before I left Vrindavan, I was with Ganasham Baba and Shripad Baba at the Gopijana Vallabha temple. That little temple which was a closet in somebody's hallway. And I was very much brokenhearted that I had to leave Vrindavan, because I really was committed to stay there for the rest of my life, however long that would be. And when I told them I had to leave, they all said to me, "If you have to leave Vrindavan, you should go to New Vrindavan." Because A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, he has told us that New Vrindavan is non-different than Vrindavan. And then Ganasham Baba, with tears in his eyes, said, "And until you can come back to Vrindavan," he said, "be a pujari at New Vrindavan." So I left, and that instruction kind of disappeared in the cloud of everything else I was doing. And when I arrived in America, after stopping in Amsterdam and London, I went to New York because Srila Prabhupada was coming there. And about a week, I was going to his classes and hearing him speak. And I was just so happy to be there. But then when he was leaving, I was wondering, what am I going to do until I can go back to Vrindavan? That's my home. And at that time, there was an announcement in the temple room that in September, Srila Prabhupada will be coming to New Vrindavan. And we need help to prepare for his arrival. He's going to be giving Bhagavad Dharma discourses. He's going to be speaking publicly on the Srimad Bhagavatam, and he will celebrate Janmashtami and his Vyas Puja. So I was thinking that's where I'm supposed to go. I remembered. And so somehow or other, I came to New Vrindavan and was sent up on this mountain. And I actually couldn't understand that place at all. And I couldn't understand the people living there at all. But I was just thinking, I'm just going to serve my Guru Maharaj here, Srila Prabhupada, until I can go back to Vrindavan. And when Srila Prabhupada came, it had such an impact on so many people's lives, including my own. When he left New Vrindavan, I was thinking that what does it mean to actually accept him as my guru? What does it mean to surrender to him if I'm just doing what I want to do? Even though I don't understand this place so much, until I get an instruction from Srila Prabhupada, I'll just stay here. And that's how I was thinking like this while I was standing in front of Radha Vrindavan Chandra, just about to leave. The influence of Srimati Radharani and Vrindavan Chandra, I really searched my heart to make a connection to a real relationship with Prabhupada through service. And one of the things about New Vrindavan that was so special to me was the vision Srila Prabhupada had, the prominent vision, which was to create a replica of Vrindavan. And Srila Prabhupada, in letters and also in personal instructions to devotees, he said, you should have a Yamuna River, you should have a Govardhan Hill, you should have the temples of the Goswamis, and he listed the names of all those temples. You should actually have replicas of the holy places of Vrindavan, and it should be a place of pilgrimage. It should be a place where devotees will feel Krishna's presence, where devotees could actually enter into Krishna's pastimes, and a place where people from all over the world could come and experience Vrindavan. And sometimes Srila Prabhupada would even say, today Vrindavan more and more is becoming very crowded, polluted, as far as the external environment. And there's many different types of antagonistic and contrary philosophies. He said, but this new Vrindavan, this Vrindavan that we create will be non-different than Vrindavan, but it will be perfectly according to the mood of pure devotional service given by our acharyas. And there will be nothing else there. It will be the heart of Vrindavan without all the external distractions. And Srila Prabhupada really believed in that. And he encouraged that so very, very strongly. And myself, I owed my whole life to Vrindavan for giving me the awakening of the path of bhakti, and eternal gratitude to Srila Prabhupada for planting the seed and showing me the way. So in that sense, New Vrindavan was a very meaningful place because of that vision. Actually, I missed Vrindavan so much that because I was taking care of cows and doing all the pujari seva for Radha Vrindavan Nath, the deities at the Brahmachari ashram, and also later doing kirtan at night, I was very, very busy, and I only had time to take prasad once in a day. And I remember before I would take prasad and before I would take rest at night, I would sit and just meditate on the holy places of Vrindavan that were so very, very dear to me. Sometimes it would take about 20 minutes. I would just sit with my eyes closed because I was always alone in those days because everybody would go out to work and I would just be there with the deities. And I did that because I wanted to keep Vrindavan completely fresh at the present moment in my heart. I didn't want to be disconnected from Vrindavan. And that was one of the most important times of the day, to just focus on Vrindavan. And the more I could focus on Vrindavan, the more I could actually be an instrument to help manifest Vrindavan in this place. And that was so much the substance of my spiritual life.
Thank you.
I forgot your question, but I hope that addresses it.
Yes, Maharaj. Thank you so much. I think this was a very important revelation about how you were so absorbed in meditating on Vrindavan. And many devotees all over the world are very aware of your efforts at the Chopati temple. And in the late 80s, you began this project in the downtown. But many are not aware that almost around the same time you also started looking for places where a farm could actually be established. So maybe you could take us on a journey from the late 80s till around 2009. Like, what was the idea of looking for a farm to be connected to a temple in the city?
When we began Sri Radha Gopinath Temple, there was just a tiny little room in the back of an old building, and that was all we had. And there was just a very small handful of devotees who were connected to it. But gradually, by Srila Prabhupada and Sri Radharani and Gopinath's mercy, the Brahmachari ashram began to develop. The congregation became stronger. Little by little, as we had more devotional energy, and as more and more devotees were coming who were really enthusiastic to absorb themselves in Krishna consciousness and expand Krishna consciousness, we little by little got little more of that building until ultimately we had the whole building. It took many years, actually. But from the very beginning, we would take the devotees on pilgrimages to Vrindavan. And sometimes we go to Mayapur, which is non-different than Vrindavan. And sometimes we would go to Jagannath Puri, which is non-different than Vrindavan. It's the place where Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was experiencing Vrindavan and separation. So these pilgrimages, I believe, very much defined the mood of our devotees. we just learned to love these holy places, and we love to come together as a family to hear about Krishna, to pray to Krishna, and to see Krishna in these holy places. So Vrindavan was very much at the very heart of Sri Sri Radha Gopinath Temple, and the early devotees in the mid-80s, they will remember that. There's only a few left, but it was very special. But as the community grew into hundreds, thousands, tens and thousands, we had an idea that, and actually that idea was there even before we started Radha Gopinath Temple, that we should have a place where we can completely absorb ourselves in Vrindavan. A place that we can feel that Vrindavan is entrusted to us to serve. And it was in the heart of Srila Prabhupada's vision and teachings. So we had this idea, but it, like so many things, it was a little seed that was underground. And we didn't really start watering it until we had more and more devotees. And in the early days, we were so lacking funds that we really hardly, it was just hand to mouth, just survival practically. And, a few devotees were helping, but it was very difficult. But as devotees were getting more faith and more confidence in the integrity and the vision of the project, more people were coming and more people were becoming more generous also. And it was always the formula of Radha Gopinath Temple, not so much to ask people for money, but to care for people in such a way and to have such a wonderful, vibrant spiritual project that people really believe in it, and from their hearts they really want to give. And that's kind of what happened, and it took some time. And at that point, we wanted to get some land, and where we could have some nice farming. We could take care of Krishna's cows, and ultimately we can execute the vision of Srila Prabhupada to recreate Vrindavan. And I felt this would be so dear to our devotees because our devotees so much love Vrindavan. In Vrindavan, Srila Prabhupada established the Krishna Balaram temple. And he especially said that this is for his disciples, which means his grand disciples and great grand disciples, who are all his disciples. He is our founder Acharya. And he especially wanted our devotees, when they come to Vrindavan, that they're really experiencing Vrindavan through the teachings and the atmosphere of Krishna Balaram temple. And there were many devotees who lived at Krishna Balaram temple in those days who hardly went anywhere else because they really felt that Srila Prabhupada said everything is right here. And we can understand from that Srila Prabhupada wanted devotees in Vrindavan to really be completely absorbed and surrounded by his mood of devotional service, which was the mood of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and our acharyas. And that is what he wanted to establish in other places also. Whether it was New Vrindavan or Hyderabad Farm, he wanted to establish places that could actually recreate Vrindavan, but it would be completely oriented toward the vision of pure devotional service as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and our acharyas have taught, as the 6 Goswamis have given us. So there was that seed, and gradually, as Krishnachandra Prabhu has so concisely and beautifully explained, we got a property endowed, and there's so many stories we could tell about that, but it just didn't work, and I could see it wasn't going to work there for various reasons. And then Krishna made it so that it was like he just opened the door and said, find another place. And that was quite inconceivable. And Madhavananda Prabhu, he's coming from Palgar, and through his efforts, HH Prabhu, they started developing a beautiful congregation near Palgar. So we were searching all around the whole Maharashtra, Bombay area, looking for a more suitable place. And they were very enthusiastic because they wanted it in that area. And they found this little tract of land near Wada. And Sanat Kumar Prabhu, toward the beginning, he went there, and he's a lawyer by his training before he became a devotee. But with his complete dedication and surrender, he totally absorbed himself in learning, cow protection and learning agriculture and trying to cultivate the village neighbors. And Sri Nandanandan and other devotees started going there. And we had a nice little farm. And when we could expand the property appropriately, and when we had devotees who finally, after so many years, believed in the vision of creating a place of pilgrimage, recreating the Vrindavan Forest, making a retreat. And Srila Prabhupada very, very much emphasized on environmental harmony and animal protection. He so much emphasized that. So I believe all of our eco-friendly projects, and there are many of them, are completely in line with what Srila Prabhupada wanted. And it's just a matter of, how to present it. We could present it by living it, but now it's become so extreme, the climate change threat, that, to give actual models of ways that people and society could actually deal with living a natural life and living in harmony with God and nature. It's very important. Set in the mood of a Vrindavan forest, where we could totally absorb ourselves in Krishna and Krishna's pastimes, and actually visit the Goswamis' temples and meditate on the Goswamis and meditate on their deities and meditate on the different places where Krishna's Leela, for his pastimes, we can discuss them. And actually, if we're absorbed in thinking of Vrindavan, we are in Vrindavan. Srila Prabhupada writes that Swarup Damodar Goswami, Gadadhar Pandit, Ramananda Rai, they actually never physically went to Vrindavan, but they were more than anybody always in Vrindavan because of their absorption. Lalita Saki, Vishaka Saki, Sri Radharani is Gadadhar Pandit. And Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he visited Vrindavan for about 2 months. But for 12 years, he lived mostly in the Gambhira, totally absorbed in the pastimes of Vrindavan. So what that means is what Lord Chaitanya taught us is service and separation. If we're absorbed in thinking of Vrindavan, if we're absorbed in the pastimes of Vrindavan, we are in fact in Vrindavan. Srila Prabhupada wrote that Vrindavan is not just a place you can go by getting a train ticket or a plane ticket. It's a state of consciousness. So the idea of the Vrindavan forest is that devotees especially our own community in Mumbai and Pune, all over Maharashtra, India, and all over the world, devotees could come and very purely in the mood of Srila Prabhupada's presentation. We're in Srila Prabhupada's heart in Vrindavan, without all the other factors and distractions that may be there. We're in Prabhupada's heart in Vrindavan. Srila Prabhupada left Radha Damodar temple so that he could bring Vrindavan to us wherever we were. And the idea of having a holy place with the temples of the Goswamis and the various holy places of Barsana and Nandagang and Jamuna and Govardhan, it's where we can actually discuss these wonderful, wonderful teachings, these wonderful personalities, these wonderful pastimes. It's a place we can meditate, we could pray, we could celebrate, and most of all, we can offer direct personal service. By offering service in the mood of the Vrindavan Forest, that is, in fact, 100% service to Vrindavan. We give the highest, ultimate, supreme esteem to the original Vrindavan, Gokul, which is 90 miles south of Delhi geographically. And nothing could replace it. But Govardhan eco-villages of Vrindavan Forest, where we could deeply cultivate service and separation, love and separation from that Vrindavan. And in doing so, it is Vrindavan. And somehow or other, we could make it just as Prabhupada would want it, and just as much as we can, we make it just like we read about in Krishna book. We don't read about traffic in Krishna book. In Srimad Bhagavatam, it's a place of beautiful gardens and flowing rivers and wonderful flowers and birds and butterflies and peacocks and cows, and it's a place where everyone is just absorbed in Krishna. And service to Govardhan Eco Village, Vrindavan Forest is a wonderful opportunity in our life to really render a service to Vrindavan that will attract people from all over the world to understand and appreciate and be transformed by the atmosphere of Vrindavan, and a place where we as a family of devotees could come together and surrender to Krishna and surrender to Sri Radha Vrindavan Bihari.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maharaj, for sharing this amazing history of so many years. One question which many devotees they have asked is about, yes, we can understand about Vrindavan and the temples which were created, but then what about Madan Mohan? So what is the connection of Madan Mohan in that particular context of the Vrindavan Forest, especially the whole replica?
Well, Sanatana Goswami is the senior most of the 6 Goswamis, Guru of Rupa Goswami. Sanatana Goswami, he was living under a tree, in fact, different trees every night. And then that Krishnadas Kapoor came and offered financial help. And Sanatana Goswami had him build the Madan Mohan temple. And according to Srila Prabhupada, that was the first major temple that we know of now in Vrindavan. Madan Mohan became the very symbol of Vrindavan. So according to the means of devotees, and along with the means comes a struggle, because if there's no struggle, if there's no surrender, then the substance of bhakti is not complete. So at a certain time, with the little that we had, and the help of many devotees, we established little tiny replicas of the Goswamis' temples in Vrindavan, and Barsana, and Nandagram, and Kamyavan, and Mahavan, and like that. And we somehow or other made a Yamuna and a Keshi Ghat and a Brahmanda Ghat. In order to really establish in the eyes and the hearts of the villagers around and people around India and the world that this is a holy place. It's not just a farm with some replicas of Vrindavan. It's actually a holy place. The way our acharyas have done that was generally to build a temple. Whether it's Tirupati or Srirangam or Ayodhya, of course. And in Vrindavan, Sanatana Goswami just didn't make a temple big enough for him and the Goswamis. He built a temple that was to really glorify Madan Mohan. And also, the Goswamis, one of the instructions they received was to locate and excavate the holy places of Krishna's pastimes. And when there's a temple like Madan Mohan, it will actually, people will take it very seriously to come to the holy places, and then they'll actually experience all the other wonderful Leela stans. So when devotees came forward who were willing to help and we had the means, I believe it was just a natural thing to actually establish Govardhan Eco Village as a holy place by building a beautiful monument. And we built it the way we did in honor of Sanatana Goswami. He's our Sambandha Guru. And preaching very much is about Sambandha, reestablishing our relationship with Krishna. And Madan Mohan is our Sambandha Murti, because Madan Mohan, he attracts even Kamadev or Cupid. And this whole world is so much being mesmerized and distracted by lust and greed, the thirst for power. These are all, Srila Prabhupada explains that profit, adoration, and distinctions are subtle forms of lust. And lust is Kamadev's business. So Sambandha means to attract people away from all of these unhealthy, materialistic, karmically entangling forms of bondage, and learn how to find happiness, meaning in loving service to Krishna. And that's what Madan Mohan represents. When Lord Chaitanya first spoke to Sanatana Goswami, his instruction was Krishna, Jivara Swarupoi Krishna Nityadas, that we are all eternal servants of Krishna. And Krishna's all attractive. So in honor of Sanatana Goswami, who carried this message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we built the Madan Mohan Temple. And knowing, according to our understanding as a community, Srila Prabhupada's vision of establishing this Sambandha of Vrindavan, Sambandha of Krishna, we felt it was just a very sweet, loving tribute to Srila Prabhupada and Sanatana Goswami. And if something's built in that spirit, we know the potency of Srila Prabhupada and Srila Sanatana Goswami will be there. And I believe that having a temple of that beautiful historical nature will not only melt the hearts of devotees, but it will establish as an actual place of pilgrimage more and more to all the hundreds of villages around us and to India and the world.
Right.
These are just some thoughts.
Thank you so much, Maharaj, for sharing these wonderful memories and insights. And you'll be happy to know that yesterday we got notification that Govardhan Eco Village has been now accredited to United Nations Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC, and also United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. So this is all in pursuance of the vision which you had for environmental sustainability in the context of Sri Vrindavan Dham. And now I request Krishnachandra Prabhu to take this conversation forward, as he was one of the first supporters helping us get this land at Govardhan Eco Village, and also for supporting the creation of the Yamuna, which is very much a part of the Vrindavan Forest theme. So I requested Krishnachandra Prabhu to take this forward.
Krishnachandra Prabhu, you and your family have, and Srinathji Prabhu's family, your two families, which is one family, have so much been at the heart of everything we're doing. And Krishnachandra Prabhu, Bhaktivedanta Hospital, Gopal's Garden, High School, Govardhan Eco Village, none of these projects could exist without the loving, compassionate spirit of your heart. And we're so grateful to you.
Maharaj, I think everybody knows that basically it is you, who has been the inspiration and the heart of all the projects, and we feel so privileged that, and often we feel extremely sad that we're not able to do enough. You never ask, but we fall short. But we are grateful to you for giving us the opportunity, Maharaj. So, Maharaj, since Gauranga Prabhu talked about the old days, I was wondering if you would like to share some sweet memories about. There are a couple of incidents that come to my mind. One is when your parents came first to Mumbai in 1989, and then you took them to Agra, and then on the way back you stopped at Vrindavan, and it happened to be your birthday. So would you like to just share, because a lot of devotees may not be actually aware of, because that gave us actually, I mean, I'm putting these pieces together later. So how much Vrindavan meant for you? At that time, it didn't strike me that how so important it was, and it was a nice story. We love to hear it. But now connecting all this, everything is really centering around for you. That was the most important. So since we're talking about Vrindavan and how your heart is in it, if you can share that memory of parents' first visit.
If you can have kirtan for just about 1 minute, and I will come right back.
Yes. Gauranga Prabhu, would you like to lead?
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna. Srinathji Prabhu would love to tell that story that he met my father in Chicago and he was on a business trip, Srinathji Prabhu, and he invited my father and mother to come to Bombay to visit because they couldn't understand what I was doing or why. And he said, the only way you'll know is if you come to India. So somehow they came. Devotee care, hospitality, how it can completely transform a person's heart. The type of hospitality that Srinathji Prabhu and Maithili Priya Devi and Krishnachandra Prabhu, Radha Priya, and all of your families, the way you extended to my mother and father, it completely transformed their hearts. And they not only appreciated, but they accepted Krishna consciousness as the most beautiful thing in the world. And they, among their best friends in life are still these devotees. So that was something very special. I'll never forget Radha Gopinath Temple. It's before it was renovated. And on Sundays, we would have our Sunday program, and the temple would be less than half full in those days and on Sundays. And I was leading kirtan, playing mridanga, and I looked around and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I saw my mother and Srinathji Prabhu's mother. They had their hands holding, and they were twirling around and smiling and loudly chanting Hare Krishna and dancing with all the devotees. And this was something that was an impossible idea in my mind, that my mother would be dancing in kirtan. And then I saw the men were dancing, going to the front of the temple in the back, and the front and the back, and my father was right among them with his hands raised, loudly chanting Hare Krishna, joyfully dancing with the devotees in the presence of Radha Gopinath. And how did that happen? Because they felt the love and the compassion of the Vaishnavas. And then Krishnachandra Prabhu, and you arranged a trip for them to see some of the sites in India. So we went to Jaipur, and I remember I took them to Radha Govinda temple, and we were standing right in the front of that darshan area, waiting for Radha Govinda's evening darshan to begin. And everybody was singing beautiful songs. And when the curtains opened, immediately, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My mother and father bowed down, and my father went right into his pocket to take out his wallet. My mother went right into her purse as soon as they got up, without anybody saying anything. And they both, handed out some rupees and said, "Can we make an offering to Krishna?" It was totally spontaneous. So that was wonderful. And then we went to Taj Mahal in Agra. And from Agra, we had a car that was going to take them to Delhi. And from Delhi, they were flying back to America. So we were driving between Agra and Delhi. And it just so happened to be December 7th, which is my birthday. And I didn't even remember it, because in those days, it really didn't mean that much to me. Birth and death are all interconnected in this world. So I I was just in the front seat and they were in the back seat. And my mother said, "Today's your birthday. And all these years, we've never done anything for you on your birthday. Is there anything we can do for you for your birthday? Anything we can give you?" And I said, "In a few minutes, we're going to be coming by a place that's most dear to me than anywhere in my life, and that's Vrindavan. As a birthday gift, let us stop in Vrindavan. And from the time we arrive to the time we leave, we'll chant Hare Krishna together, singing. I'll sing first, and then you respond." So as soon as we came to the area of Vrindavan in the car, we started a kirtan. And I remember the first place we went is near Radharaman Temple. And it was December, it was a little cold. And I remember I told my father, "Better you take your shoes off here because somebody may take away your shoes. If it's not a monkey, it could be, a human, because you have shoes that look different than others." And my mother too. So I said, "Take your shoes off." So they did. And I'll never forget my father's first step out of the car was into a very large, fresh, warm, in fact, it was smoking because it was cold out, pile of cow dung. And he had these nice socks and they were completely covered in cow dung. It went up to his ankle. And for him, an American man, elderly man, struggling middle class, he was quite shocked. And he said, "What am I supposed to do?" And I told him that cow dung is pure. This is a blessing. And then I took him to a pump well, and I pumped the water and tried to wash his feet. And that was a cultural experience for him. But I was just laughing in my heart. And we went into Radharaman Temple and we chanted kirtan for about an hour there. And then we were going through the streets of Vrindavan, having kirtan. And we went to Loy Bazaar. And we were not even in Loy Bazaar. I think we were at Radha Damodar Temple. And my mother and father, they said that the Muffatlal family and the Desai family were so kind to us. We want to get a gift for them. What do you think we should give them? And I remember my mother said, "Let's buy them deities." So we went to Loy Bazaar and we select, my mother and father asked me to select the deities, and we got Krishna and Balaram for Srinathji Prabhu's family, and we got Gauranga for your family. And those deities are still there, very much prominent. In fact, for the Pune Yatra every year, the presiding deities was the Gauranga that my mother and father bought for your family. And that was the transformation they had. We spent the whole day having kirtan in Vrindavan. Then we came to Delhi and they departed.
Thank you, Maharaj. That was very special. Yes, these for our Radha Gopinath Mandir, Gaur Nitai, Gaur Purnima also, the Abhishek, also these are the same deities. And it's fitting that they actually were from your parents, really guided by you. Also, when you talked about the yatras when you started, I remember, Maharaj, the very first yatra ever, a 4-day yatra in December of 1986 was to Vrindavan. And I had not even heard about the word Barsana. I didn't know what Barsana meant till we went there. And what was amazing then and later was the relationships that you had with the Brijvasis in spite of language barriers, because we had not really had much. Later on, we've seen from your book and also from your lectures, but and the stories about Ghanshyam Baba. But that was the first exposure we had. So how relationships go beyond, transcend all the languages, because we went unexpectedly to Panditji's house, at about 4 in the afternoon. We had lunch. You asked me to speak to them in Hindi and say that the 40 hungry devotees have not eaten. And amazingly, how they just spontaneously responded, just opened their house and their hearts. So I wanted to ask you, Maharaj, how did you, I know your love was for Vrindavan was there, but how did you see these Brijvasis in the same spirit, and how did they actually see you? How was the connection made and developed in such a strong bond? We could see that this was deeper than anything. It was quite extraordinary. And yet subsequently in all the yatras and the visits to Vrindavan, we could see that constantly. So how was it that you, how did you see them, and how did they perceive you?
Sometimes we talk about formative years, how much they have an impact in our life. When I first became a devotee, it was living with Brijvasis. For almost a year, I just lived with Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, and a small group of his devotees came for about 10 days. But other than that, my only association was with Brijvasis, the sadhus and the townspeople of Vrindavan and Barsana and Nandagang and Govardhan, and the simplicity of their love and the devotion and their complete faith and attachment to Srimati Radharani and Sri Krishna. It was the fullest, deepest, most inclusive spiritual religious experience that I believed could exist. And in those days, there was only 2 or 3 Western people who lived in Braj Bhumi. There was Asim Krishnadas Prabhu. There was Radha Dasi, a girl from Australia who was a follower of Sripad Baba. And that's about all that I knew of. So the Brijvasis just took me in as like their own child. The families, wherever I would go, they were so kind. Give me brajarotis, have kirtan, and very rarely did anyone speak English. But somehow or other, when we really respect and feel for people, then language is not even a concern so much. There's a language of the heart, or even if they would speak Hindi, just the feeling of kindness and compassion, I knew they were talking about Krishna. I could feel a communication that was beyond the language, and they were like that with me. So yes, it was the formative years of my life in Krishna consciousness was living with Brijvasis in Sri Vrindavan Dham. And even after being away for many, many years, when I returned, some of those same Brijvasis were still there. And they were just so happy to see me, and I felt so at home to be with them. And it's family. And although, philosophically there may be some, minor differences in perceptions, but, when there's love and family, these things, they actually they make it even sweeter.
Thank you so much, Maharaj.
And I remember that was the first time I got to introduce devotees that I was guiding in Krishna consciousness to my Brijavasi family, and it was very, very special. And just the selfless love and service for these simple people who are actually financially very poor, especially at that time.
Mm.
Now, some of those families, have grown a lot. But in those days, it was very simple and very, very basic material means that they lived by, but still with such joy and gratitude. Within minutes, they could make a feast for 40 people who just, spontaneously come in their house. And we didn't even ask them for food. They as soon as we came in, they insisted. It was just, and I was just so happy to see the connection that all our devotees made.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. Yeah, so as you were earlier also saying that how you perceived Vrindavan, how important Vrindavan was in your spiritual connection to Prabhupada, and then when you went to New Vrindavan, you still always dreamt of Vrindavan, and then Prabhupada's vision of how you wanted to develop New Vrindavan could not be fulfilled at that time completely. And then you mentioned how you took up in the last 20 odd years, we looked at the farm and the environmental side, and then developing now the last 15 years with GEV. So what would be your desire or prayer or request to all of us, how we can best serve the Vrindavan, Govardhan Vrindavan Forest of Grace? What can we do?
On the subject of Brijabasis and Govardhan Eco Village, the head pujari of Sri Radha Madan Mohan Temple, because the original forms, the original personalities of Sri Radha Madan Mohan moved from their temple in Vrindavan to Karoli, which is in Rajasthan. And that was well over 400 years ago. And, families have continued the worship of the original Madan Mohan deity for all of these generations. And the leading pujari who cooks for the deities and wakes the deities up and dresses Madan Mohan, and he's been doing it for about 50 years every day since his childhood. And this personality, he helped us to get the exact form of Madan Mohan as the original made in South India. He gave us so many specifications and gave us so much directions. So he was just really helpful. And when it came for the Prana Pratishta, the installation of Sri Radha Madan Mohan, he came, which was very rare. He said in 50 years, he had only left Karoli 2 times. 1 time, or 3 times. 2 times for family emergencies in other places, and the 3rd time was to come to Govardhan Eco Village. That's how important he felt it was. And he participated in the Prana Pratishta. He taught us how to cook exactly the way Madan Mohan has been traditionally given offerings over, 4 centuries. And the night of that Prana Pratishta, that was the deities were installed in the morning and afternoon, and in the evening, I went for the darshan, and he was standing right in front, and we were standing next to each other. And this is the head pujari of Madan Mohan in Karoli. He said to me, with tears in his eyes, he was actually so emotional, he was crying. He said, these deities are exact replicas. These deities, he said, they are absolutely non-different than Madan Mohan and Karoli. And then he got even more emotional. And he said, after 400 years, Madan Mohan finally returned to their original temple in Vrindavan. For someone of his experience, realization, and stature to say that, and he wasn't saying that to make us feel good, he really meant it, was such a reconfirmation. And one of the leading pujaris and a great scholar and saint, Srivats Goswami from Radharaman Temple, he brought a beautiful photograph of Sri Sri Radharaman that he personally took with his own camera. And he placed that photo on the altar of Sri Radharaman Temple. And he sang a Brijabasi song. And he composed a last line to the song. And it was, and now Sri Sri Radharaman has come to live in their temple in Govardhan Eco Village. And Ramesh Chandra Goswami and Sushil Goswami, who have been pujaris, and they're just like Radharaman. Srivats Goswami, his family are descendants of the original pujaris who were trained by Gopal Bhatta Goswami. And in Nandagram, from the beginning of that temple, you know, the families have shared the worship of Krishna Balaram at Yashoda and Nanda Maharaj at Krishna's. This is the house that Krishna eternally lives at Nandagram, Nanda Bhavan. And here's one of the senior most of all the priests and pujaris of that temple. And he came and he inaugurated our Nandagram temple with so much love and devotion in his heart. He offered the first arti, and he personally said that, you know, that this is Nandagram. So when Srila Prabhupada explained it's non-different, when it's an offering of sincere love and devotion by a community of devotees, and when these most esteemed Brijabasis come and tell us the same thing. Our great scholar David Haberman, Prem Dasji, you know, he's written beautiful books about Govardhan, and when he saw our Govardhan Hill at Govardhan Eco Village and did parikrama, he was in tears and emotion, wanting to bring everybody to come here and see Govardhan Hill. This is Govardhan, this is Govardhan. And the Govardhan Shila that's there at our Govardhan Hill was given as a gift from one of the dearmost pure-hearted of all Brijabasis from the Govardhan area. So there's so many beautiful, wonderful, loving blessings at Govardhan Eco Village. And these blessings we want to share with one another, and together we want to share with the world. And at this particular time, we really want to give devotees from all over the world an opportunity to participate. And if you can present your idea, Krishnachandra Prabhu, I'll be so very grateful. Where, you know, in the past, we requested devotees to adopt our cows so that for their whole lives we could give them the best possible care. And also devotees could feel a personal, intimate connection through service with the cows. Because in so many ways, it's part of Vedic culture for grihastas to have cows. So if you're living in cities and towns, you may not be able to physically do that, but if you're helping to care for cows at Govardhan Eco Village, then you have a cow and you're doing cow seva. And similarly, there's dham seva. There's service to the dham. And when we make offering to the deities, Krishna actually feels hungry. It's not just a sentiment of devotees. Krishna's Om Purnamada Purnamidam Aham Sarvasya Prabhavo Mata Sarvam Pravartate. How could Krishna be hungry? Everything that exists is created by him. He's full and complete, but yet he's hungry for love. And he actually becomes hungry to give a devotee a sense of need. And when we're doing deity worship, we feel a need. When the idea of preaching, it's not just giving Krishna to others. We feel that these people in the world need Krishna. And, Srila Prabhupada and our acharyas were willing to give so much energy and give so much attention and even spend so much money to help people understand Krishna, because we feel the need in their hearts. So this idea of feeling a sense of need is Krishna's arrangement that devotees really connect to. So by Krishna's grace, he's given us a sense of need. In the original Vrindavan, there's such a need to clean the Yamuna, and there's such a need to clean the lands of the Dham, and there's such a need to serve the Dham. And here at Govardhan Eco Village, we also have our own Vrindavan, our own Srila Prabhupada's Vrindavan, a manifestation of my heart so much because of what Vrindavan means to me, and it's so inseparable from my relationship with Srila Prabhupada, Vrindavan. So there's a sense, I would like devotees to feel a need that Vrindavan needs you and me, so that this forest could really, really flourish. And in this way, we're opening this beautiful Sangam for devotees to participate and actually kind of adopt parts of Vrindavan, so that it can be preserved, it could flourish, it can expand. And then Vrindavan is not just ours in a figurative way, but when we're actually doing service like this, through integrating service to Vrindavan with our livelihood and with what we do in our life, then it really becomes Dham Seva, and it becomes our Vrindavan.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. So beautifully explaining this. Actually, we do have some thoughts, but just before that, if you have kind permission, since many devotees may not really have seen the Forest of Grace, we have just a 5-minute video which we would like to just show. It's very beautiful, and then I can just explain to you what we had in mind.
Because this is what Prabhupada wanted us to do.
Hare Krishna.
Wanted us to recreate Vrindavan.
Hare Hare. Oh.
We can recreate the same spirit purely according to Prabhupada's vision. And people can experience the same atmosphere of Vrindavan without the distractions.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Rasikacharya Prabhu, for showing us this beautiful film. So, we are, as Maharaj asked me to give some ideas, so we are actually inviting devotees to participate to create a devotional family centered around Vrindavan and in service of a very dear vision of Srila Prabhupada, our Acharyas, and His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj. So together we can all preserve and improve the atmosphere in the present as well as into the future. Radhanath Swami Maharaj and the amazing devotees of GEV, both brahmacharis and grihasthas who are staying there, are already giving us the spiritual atmosphere. So what is also important to preserve and improve the atmosphere and sanctity is the physical environment, to keep it pure, clean, relishable. So the landscape, the temples, the flowing Yamuna, the worship, the Acharya Samadhis, etc., which you saw in the video. So all these need to be properly preserved. And while the amount required is quite modest compared to the enormous spiritual value of the Vrindavan Forest, still we do need help. So for those who are inspired and excited and feel privileged to volunteer to help, we do have a simple scheme, what we call the Vrindavan Forest Sevak. And if you can just show the screen, please. Rasikacharya Prabhu, can we have the screen of the Vrindavan Forest Sevak scheme? But while we, okay. So it's a very simple scheme where just anyone can donate 5,000 rupees, which and then we become a Sevak there in the Vrindavan Forest. And we this is maybe once in a year also, and we would just put this request to devotees. Whoever feels inspired will be very happy. The details are given below, and also we will send it subsequently through our communication to various devotees and congregation. Maharaj, would you like to comment on the scheme or on this?
I really am grateful to you, Krishnachandra Prabhu and Gauranga Prabhu, and all the devotees who have put this together, Haripriya Radha Devi and Sanakumar Prabhu, Shri Guru Charan Prabhu, and Vasudev Prabhu. There's so many devotees I can name, but we understand that bhakti is realized through service. And we could all really be connected to this service. And I'm very hopeful and very confident that by preserving and expanding our Vrindavan Forest in a very beautiful and wonderful devotional way, it will attract more and more our devotees to come from all over India and all over the world. And it will attract the general public from all over the world also to really come and experience what Srila Prabhupada taught, simple living, high thinking, based on the principle of pure devotional service. And Vrindavan is the eternal heart of Krishna. And I'll just be so grateful if devotees will come forward to participate in this wonderful opportunity to really put together a larger and more intimate family of devotees whose hearts are in Govardhan Eco Village, through this type of service from wherever in the world one may be.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. We will do our best, and I think we all feel very, very privileged. I can say that we are somehow connected to this unfolding historical project of Govardhan Eco Village. I think it's just the beginning. It's going to go way beyond our lifetime and our family's lifetime, and so many others will benefit thanks to your understanding and implementation of Srila Prabhupada's vision. Thank you, Maharaj.
If I could just say, Rup Raghunath Prabhu, we met him at the Lady Northcote Hindu Orphanage back when we first started Radha Gopinath Temple, and now he with Sanat Kumar Prabhu and others are going to the villages, this Prayag program, which I believe is one of the most important and dear programs that we've ever done. And it's just a seed that I'm hoping will really expand of actually, giving Krishna consciousness in a very holistic, attractive way to the villagers, because there's so much strife and suffering within the village life of India. And, through our environmental schemes to teach them, how to live in harmony with Mother Nature and to help them in that way, and to give them a holy place of pilgrimage. So I believe that this Vrindavan Forest will reach, hundreds and thousands of village people and transform their lives in every way. And more we're finding even academic institutions from India and in the Western world coming for environmental projects to study or have conferences, But when they go to Vrindavan Forest, they, some of the scholars have actually said, after, going to an environmental conference with academics, great people from all over the world, when they go to the Yamuna Arti, or they go to the Govardhan, or they go to these Vrindavan forest areas, they say, yes, now we can understand what it all means. And that's the experience, and that could happen more and more, because in one sense we've just begun. So please, whoever feels the means and the inspiration, let us all come together and do whatever we can do to participate in this beautiful offering of love to Sri Sri Radha Madan Mohan.
Thank you, Maharaj. And actually, there's a very pleasant announcement for all the devotees to hear that, as an extension of Maharaj's deep love for Vrindavan, which we got connected, say, 35 years ago. Even through this COVID also, we are happy to announce that there is an online Kartik Yatra to Sri Vrindavan Dham with Radhanath Swami Maharaj from November 1st to November 5th. That's, I repeat, Sunday, November 1st to Thursday, November 5th. So other details, of course, will be shared later, but please mark your calendar. These 5 days, we are going to be transported to Sri Vrindavan Dham. So it is not the end today. Today was just the preliminary dipstick, but I think we're going to taste Vrindavan Dham just in 3 weeks' time. Thank you so much, Maharaj.
Thank you, and my special gratitude to you, Gauranga Prabhu. I was talking about this Vrindavan Forest and a retreat center for about 15 years, and when it somehow got the attention of Gauranga Prabhu, then what can I say? Then history started unfolding.
Yes, Maharaj.
We are waiting for hearing the mystery of Vrindavan from you in the Kartik. Thank you so much.
Little things are so large. When I see the butterflies expanding in population, going from flower to flower, when we put that in the context of Krishna and Krishna's pastimes, it becomes the most beautiful, most purifying thing of the heart.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mati Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Namane. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastya Desha Dharane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna,
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Hare
Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare
Hare Rama,
Hare
Hare Rama, Rama Rama,
Hare
Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare
Hare Krishna, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada.
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada.
Jaya Radha Madan Mohan, Radha Madan Mohan, Radhe.
Jaya Radha Madan Mohan, Radha Madan Mohan Radhe.
Jai Radha Vrindavan Bihari, Radha Vrindavan Bihari, Radhe.
Jaya Radha Vrindavan Bihari, Radha Vrindavan Bihari Radhe.
Jaya Radha Gopinatha, Radha Gopinatha, Radhe.
Jaya Radha Gopinath Radha Gopinath Radhe.
Jaya Radha Vrindavan Chandra, Radha Vrindavan Chandra, Radhe.
Jaya Radha Vrindavan Chandra Radha Vrindavan Chandra Radhe.
Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai.
Jai
Shri Govardhan Eco Village Ki Jai.
Jai
Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai.
Jai
Ananti Koti Vaishnava Brinda Ki Jai.
Jai
Bansha Kalpatarubhyascha
Alpatarubhyascha
Kripa
Kripasintu
Sindhuvya Evacha
Evacha
Patitanam
Nitanam
Pavanebhyo
Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo
Vaishnavebhyo
Namo
Namo Namaha. Thank you very much.
Hare